wake up in a room you've never seen before. In front of you are two men you've never met. They're talking about science fiction. You wonder whether you're just dreaming, or if you've entered the Sci-Fi Zone.
Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Zone. I'm Forrest.
And I'm Jordan, and I am very, very frightened of the horrible, horrible movie that's coming out in a couple weeks, which is Star Trek Beyond.
Okay, that sounds like exaggerating.
Biased, more like, but I mean, okay, we're painting a picture here, and the picture is Star Trek, the revamp, is like, it's okay. It's got some concerns, but we can overlook them. Then it was, Wrath of Khan Part 2.0. And that was just, besides Khan himself, a steaming pile of poo. And now we have a director who isn't J.J. Abrams, so we might not have as much lens flare. However, we're replacing it with the, what was it, Fast and Furious he directed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's known for high-speed action chases that have nothing to do with the realms of reality or physics.
Well, okay. I get where you're coming from there. But they're also really enjoyable popcorn flicks.
Yeah, but Star Trek was never a popcorn flick. It was never meant to be. I mean, okay. Gosh darn it! I'm already gonna be soapboxing here. We're gonna try. I am gonna try and focus a lot more on the new revamp. I mean, we all can agree it's meant to be different, alternate dimension, alternate reality kind of stuff. But Gene Roddenberry, from the beginning, wanted his series to depict a tale of humanity, of the potential of humanity. He wanted it to be something that looked forward to a life that was better than where we were at the time. I mean, yeah, the original series might not have been the best at that. There was a lot of randomness and violence, and Kirk was kind of almost like a Wild West type of captain compared to Picard. However, you still had from way, way, way back, even around before and during civil rights movements, he had a show depicting humanity with an American captain and a first officer who was an alien, and then having his command bridge crew all being of every different nationality, including someone who was Japanese, somebody who was Russian, somebody who was black. And that sounds normal now, but back then, the idea that these types of people who were completely different and hostile to each other working together was truly revolutionary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the reason that I'm able to tolerate the Reboot series as much as I am is because I kind of am able to separate it mentally from Star Trek. So it's there's Star Trek and then there's Star Trek, and for me they're two totally different things.
Okay. Well, there's a flaw with that they all have the same names, and they even look the same, and they try to act very similarly to the original cast members. I mean, you have to admit that they did a great job with their casting. That's probably my biggest thing that I enjoyed about the reboot, was how incredibly close to mannerisms and just even looks the characters and the actors that they found were. I was astonished, especially with Bones. Bones blew me away.
Yeah.
I was like, how did they do that?
Carl Urban is so great as Bones, and Zachary Quinto as Spock.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it's a fantastic casting. I mean, I think the movies play out really well. They're just not great Star Trek movies, I guess.
Yeah, well, they're Star Wars movies, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he even says that, in his, director's cut of the first one. I think he's saying he's bringing Star Wars to Star Trek. And, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that's fine, Growing up, I liked Star Wars more than Star Trek. But then, as I thought about it, I was like, hold on a second, though. That's, how do I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this that like anybody could really kind of grab. I guess it would be like bringing some rock and roll to tea time. I mean, sure, it makes it sound like it'd be more fun, but you're taking two things that really were never meant to be put together and smashing them together and hoping something wonderful comes out of it instead of just a ruined tea party.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with studios as well, because they don't have faith in people's ability to accept high science fiction. They want these summer blockbusters that are going to make millions of dollars and fill seats, and so they need action, and they don't want a lot of philosophy and a lot of speculation and all of that. They just want to throw laser beams at stuff and everyone will like it.
Yeah, sadly you're true there. I mean, at the end of the day, they need to line their pocketbooks. They need to make sure that they can pay their actors, because their actors get paid ridiculous amounts of money. Yeah. Like, there is an end to be met and like a money goal. And like, movies are expensive, millions and millions of dollars. Like, I think it's ironic that Hollywood probably spends on entertainment more than many third world countries spend on their own population.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I can understand that the bottom line is kind of got to be met. But I mean, we're talking about a series that foundationally has been a predictor of the future, a look to a higher calling for, I guess, humanity in general. I'm leaning more towards Next Generation, because that's really where I feel like they really stepped into their running as an ideal potential future, and talking about like potential like technologies and like the different ways that people can be living and growing. But essentially, we are talking about like, we've kind of seen, it's not like we saw a merging of these two genres, like a Star Wars-y feel with a Star Trek-y type of like atmosphere. It's more of like Star Trek got absorbed by the Star Wars-y feel, and that's all we kind of got.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the problem is that the Star Trek movies have always had kind of a spotty attendance rate. You had Star Trek the Motion Picture, and then Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan was extremely successful, and then people weren't as into The Search for Spock, and then they loved the fourth one. Is that The Voyage Home?
I think so.
Because five is The Final Frontier.
Okay, yeah, so 4 was Voyage Home, 5 is Final Frontier, and then 6, which is in my opinion the best one, is Undiscovered Country.
Yeah. And, you know, some of them did really well, and some of them got kind of a lackluster response. And then you had the failing of Star Trek Enterprise, because not very many people liked that series. And so I think they started looking to Star Trek as kind of this failed thing. And it has a very niche group of super fans who are loyal to Star Trek no matter what, but they were trying to make something that would be accessible and would get them a return on their investment consistently.
That's true. Although we are living in the age of reboots, you know? I mean, heck, you don't even have to look around. Like, look at the Pokemon Go phenomena. Like, good grief. I know Pokemon still makes money with younger generations, but they release something that like the grown-up Pokemon fans can have access to and not feel silly for buying a little handheld like gaming device, and it explodes. I mean, I don't know if we could assume that could happen to Star Trek, because you're right, it's a very niche kind of group, but it'd be really cool to see a real resurgence in Star Trek, and a resurgence of what I would call like the heart of Star Trek, because I mean, this conglomeration that we have, effectively, you really do need to look at it like a Star Wars movie, and then you put it toe to toe with Star Wars. I mean, is Star Trek Beyond really going to be able to like be on par with Star Wars Episode 7? Like, we know the answer is going to be no.
Well, are we talking about from a filmmaking standpoint or from a audience attendance standpoint?
I'm talking across all fronts. I'm talking cinematography, acting, plot, audience retention, audience hype, and also longevity. I honestly can think and probably can predict perfectly that my kids, who they're like 16 months old right now, that when they're 8 and 9 are going to be watching all the Star Wars movies with me and loving them.
Yeah.
And when they get older, I hope that they'll be enjoying Star Trek with me. Next Generation, Voyager. Voyager's my favorite. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with that. Sorry, audience, but it's the best. Anyway, so I hope they watch those with me as they get older and have that same appreciation I do. And then when I show them the reboot, I don't see them or anybody else in 10 years watching those movies anymore.
I will be.
Okay. You and maybe the 6 others that are out there.
Yeah.
But and I that might be harsh. I mean, I know there are fans, and I'm not saying the movies are utter rubbish. I'm just saying that for what they're trying to be, not only is there stiff competition, but there's just better versions out there of the same type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's like, it feels like Star Trek is trying to be something it's not. And so it's alienating a large portion of the audience, nostalgia audience that's there. And then the people who are left are like the nostalgia people who stick around, plus any of the new fans that come around, which I know are not the hugest of numbers. Hugest of numbers, that's good English right there.
I think what really matters to these studio executives who greenlight these projects is the fact that people come to the theaters, they make their money back, and some extra money on top of that. And the Reboot series has been doing a great job of that. I don't know that longevity is really what they have in mind.
Yeah, that's kind of the cancer of the modern entertainment industry, is that they really are looking mostly, not always. There's a lot of great places you can find like real cult classics and good films because they're good films. But like it really has become more of a cash grab, especially for Hollywood. I mean, I guess you got to say, like, especially for you in Utah, you go to Sundance, you're going to be seeing some pretty awesome flicks that are like really hitting home with powerful messages and impactful storylines with really great characters. But yeah, they're never going to be seeing any major silver screen time. They're never going to be making like multi-billions of dollars across seas. It's like, I don't know, there's almost like this divide between the two. It's either there's the movies that get a lot of attention but nobody cares about in a year, or there's the movies that nobody seems to care about when they come out, but 20 years later, like, anybody who's anybody will know everything about those movies.
Yeah. And it's really hard to guess what is going to have longevity and what isn't. I remember, what year was it that Slumdog Millionaire came out? Was it 2008? 2009?
That was a good one.
One of those years. But that movie came out and it got so much hype and so much buzz, and it was a really great movie, but nobody talks about it anymore. It's like that movie doesn't even exist.
Yeah. If we're talking about the movie graveyard is vast and deep.
Yeah. And like a couple years ago, you had Guardians of the Galaxy and X-Men Days of Future Past come out in the same year.
Yeah.
And I think for most people that I knew, they liked them both equally. But now, a couple years later, I hear about Guardians of the Galaxy a lot, but I don't hear about Days of Future Past near as much.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you're talking there comparatively about very, very similar genres, and were executed in almost similar styles. I mean, granted, they did have different plot devices and such, but we're talking essentially like something that can be really like unbiasedly comparative, even more so than Star Wars and Star Trek, probably. That because they're just so similar in their fields and their audience, and they probably are working with the same audience effectively. So yeah, that is interesting. So what's the magic that made Guardians the one that gets remembered? I mean, that's probably the question of the ages. Like, every Hollywood person would kill to know how to tell what movie will go viral and stay forever and what one won't. Because I guarantee you the writers of these movies wish that they could make things a bit more, tactile, could make them a bit more impactful. I mean, I don't know. I can tell you from a creator's point of view, the instant you start feeling like you have to produce something based on what others expect and not so much because of you want to make it, you immediately feel a stifling. And your creativity is just kind of squandered and squashed. And despite the fact that you could be incredibly successful by leaning to the ear and the whims of the masses, like, you'll lose the heart of what you're doing. And I worry almost for, like, the Hollywood writers. Like, do they still feel passionate about what they do, or are they getting so caught up in the money printing machine that they're losing touch with why they started what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, and I think what really made Guardians of the Galaxy something that is going to endure over time is the fact that when I went and saw it, I felt that I was seeing something truly different.
Yeah.
It was a superhero movie, but the way it was executed was so unique and original. And that movie is so close to being in my top 10 of all time.
Oh, wow.
But at the time, I couldn't tell you which I liked better, whether it was Guardians or whether it was Days of Future Past. But over time, Guardians of the Galaxy has stuck with me more because in the end, X-Men Days of Future Past, though it is a fantastic film, is also just another superhero movie. But Guardians of the Galaxy, just the way they did the soundtrack and the humor and the visuals and everything, it stands out. And so I come back to that more often than I do Days of Future Past.
Okay. Kind of trying to pull us back onto topic a little bit more. Like, I kind of want to swing back around because what you're saying reminded me about how, so you're talking about like what stuck with you. Maybe that's what has saved the new Star Treks for me was when the first one came out. Although I wasn't the biggest fan of the shakeup that they did, I had to admit that the visuals, especially with the black hole scene at the end, combined with the music and the soundtrack, like, it was pretty incredible and really fun to see in the theater. And then again, I don't know if it was just the way the character was written or the fact that it was Benedict Cumberbatch, but Khan as a character saved the second movie for me, almost like how the Joker saved the Dark Knight. Like, I honestly did not like the Dark Knight, except the Joker was so well done. And same thing was with Star Trek 2, was that I loved Khan, the character, the way he's portrayed, the way he's acted, and the way that they justified his decisions. Where, a good villain's a villain where you almost want to cheer for him, and the good villains are the ones that, like, you almost are sad to see go because you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. Khan was that. He was ruthless. He was, like, almost, I don't know, calculated, and like a sniper rifle. He was calibrated for being a killing machine, and yet he wasn't just killing because he was like programmed to be evil, but that he wanted to save his people. Like, that's one of those things where, like, you wish he could have won or that they could have figured something out. That's a villain that sticks with you. So yeah, Khan saved the second movie for me, despite all the horrible inconsistencies in there.
Yeah. The thing I loved about Khan as a villain is he's really unpredictable. You don't know what he's thinking, what he's planning to do. And so throughout the whole movie, it's like he's helping them, but deep in your mind that he doesn't intend to do that. Like, he's not really trying to help them.
Oh, yeah.
And so it makes him a really cool villain. Something that I don't like about a lot of the movies, the blockbuster movies that come out now, is the villains are completely predictable. you know what's in their
yeah.
head, you know what they're going to try to do. That's one of my biggest criticisms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the villains are just feel so copy and paste.
Yeah.
So I love seeing a villain where it's like, I don't know what you're thinking or what you're going to do next.
Yeah, so you're describing what I call static villains, which are like the carbon copy villains, the ones that, that you can draw parallelisms between all of them. Like, I don't know, like Thanos is like the Emperor from Star Wars. Like, he really is. Dark hooded figure in the darkness manipulating things. We're going to have a big confrontation from him. He's going to be super powerful. No one knows how we're going to beat him, but somehow we will. The same, it's like when you can draw so many parallels, you're right. It's a very flat and uninteresting villain. Khan breaks that shell. Once again, I think because he's humanized. Another good one I would turn to of a villain, but he almost wasn't. So it almost doesn't count. But Snape from Harry Potter. I mean, they did such a good job of the entire series. You hate Snape, but you have to admit that he has been on the right side of every single book. You hate admitting it, but you did. And then you had spoiler alert for anybody who apparently still hasn't read Harry Potter. I think you deserve to have it spoiled by this point. He kills Dumbledore, and you're convinced. You're fine, oh, we've got the proof. He was bad all along. And then you find out at the end of the 7th book, you're like, dang it! Not only was he not bad, but he might have been the best character of the whole thing. And so you're like, great. That's the thing. Any characters that do that, and plus, heck, characters like Khan are actually more realistic. If you think about, we have allies in the Middle East that we work with, but we've had issues with it. Iran's a perfect example. Sorry, I'm not going to try and get too political here, but you do realize that Iran was very helpful with us during Desert Storm and War on Terror when we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. Although we know that Iran does not agree with us in a lot of policies and that they are not big fans of our country as a whole, they were willing to work with us to get rid of some of these terrorist groups in return for their favors of their own. I think that's very similar to a relationship you have with Khan, where when your goals are aligned, you can trust each other, but you're always politically or in Khan's case, physically, you're part of you's always wondering, okay, what are they getting out of this? Are they who's gonna have the advantage at the end? Are they ever gonna betray us? That's the struggle with working in politics, genuine politics. I'm not talking about Trump and Hillary screaming at each other in the next few months. I'm talking about genuine politics where you have different people with different agendas all trying to figure out how to get what they want as easily as possible without having to fight somebody else for it.
Yeah. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with why Khan works so well in that movie, because it's that kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. But you also know that that friend who's working with you also doesn't like you very much. So while they're helping you, they're looking at how they're going to be getting the upper hand after they're done helping you. So it's kind of like playing a game of chess while also playing another game of chess.
I like that analogy. That's good. And you're playing checkers on your phone at the same time.
Yeah. And so it's just really cool because you see, Kirk and the Enterprise crew teaming up with Khan against, I guess the corrupt admiral or whatever rank he was. I don't remember.
He was an admiral, and that was one of my many, many sticking points. I think is there anything I don't want to trample over you. Do you have anything else you want to say to wrap that up? Or
No,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I do want to shift gears because I do think I owe the audience a explanation of why specifically I can't really stand the new movies. Do you mind if I soapbox a bit and just kind of list off my issues?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So some of these, I'm not going to say every single one because A, they're not going to flow right into my head, and B, there's a lot. I'm going to say one of the grievous ones. style-wise, I wasn't actually too affected by that. A lot of people complain like, "Oh, they don't have blasters in there like Star Trek, Star Wars blasters." I could easily just be like, "Fine, you can have that. I don't really care." I was very perplexed with the idea of the time travel. I think that like it was a very flat reason to have an alternate universe, and not so much the time travel itself, but the method of doing so. Because they never distinguished why the first time they fell into a black hole, they just been sent back in time, and then the second time they die. Same black hole, same technology. They never explained or even tried to explain that. Let's see what else was there in the first one. It makes absolutely no sense that if Vulcan collapsed in on itself because of a black hole at its core, which was pretty cool, by the way, but like the visuals of that was spectacular. But then like not even 10 minutes later, they show a scene of Spock standing on the frozen planet where he's found, watching Vulcan get destroyed. That, for a physicist, made my brain implode, just like Vulcan, because it's so ridiculous. I don't even know if I can go into it of why it's so ridiculous, but just you cannot understand how a planet being close enough to another planet getting sucked into a black hole physically A wouldn't work because of gravity and like orbits, but B, even if you could figure out a way to make it work, then the planet Spock was on would shortly have been pulled into a black hole, unless you're assuming that these black holes are temporary, and then you're deciding that you can suddenly destroy matter on a whim, and the laws of physics involving this black hole and red matter don't seem to matter at all. Huh, that was a punny thing I just said. The whole Vulcan, not Vulcan, just the Romulans' ideas. I thought the villains of the Romulans were very flat. Like their idea, like, was very childish. Like, oh, we'll go back and destroy everybody. You think the first thing they would do if they went back in time would be to go back to their people and warn them, hey, in the next 100 years, the star's going to blow up and you're all going to die. We have proof of it in our sensor logs because our ship saw it. But no. Instead, they're going to just go and try and kill Starfleet because apparently that'll solve the problem. Anyway, move on to the second movie. Unless you had anything you want to say. I don't want to talk forever.
Okay, let me just defend the first movie here for a second.
Okay. The second one's where I've got my real ammunition. Like I said, I liked the first one. It was forgivable. The second one's really what I don't like.
Well, I like the second one more than the first one, so that'll be interesting.
Buckle up, audience. We're going to have like a fisticuffs brawl in here.
First off, I liked J.J. Abrams' take on the Star Wars universe. I think a lot of the preconceptions we have about Star Trek come from the Next Generation and beyond. The original series was just kind of...
True.
I don't feel like it was very scientifically grounded. It was just, drama and space. It
tried. That was the thing. It tried. It was wrong in a lot of things, so that's why it has that kind of feel, I think. But
yeah,
I do understand what you're saying. So I can concede the point.
If you're going to look at the Star Trek Reboot movie from a scientific perspective, yeah, it's going to be terrible. But what I really liked about it is it's a fun movie, and that's really all that it tries to be. And I think they did a good job of resetting the timeline. They really had to, because at that point there was so much Star Trek canon that there was really no way to make a decent movie without clashing with something somewhere and causing inconsistencies. So I kind of liked the whole alternate timeline aspect of it.
I agree. That really was the only option they had to pull off what they're doing. That is a good point. But that also then concedes that they're in a parallel universe, which means that they should be trying to stay consistent when they can. With a lot of my issues may not even just be purely scientific based, they're technology based. Like we're told very clearly in the original series, Beyond, and in the new series, the limitations of technology, but then they break these limits whenever it's convenient. That'll be a big theme for the second movie.
That's called Star Wars prequelitis.
Oh, even
Yeah.
that name makes me feel gross inside.
But one thing that I really love about the 2009 Star Trek is the score. It is one of my favorite scores of the past 10 years. Michael Giacchino did a great job of putting in his own ideas and mixing them with the classic Star Trek theme, and it was fantastic. And the visuals were great.
It was.
I thought the performances were great and effectively conveyed the emotions they were supposed to. Chris Hemsworth in the beginning was amazing, and for those reasons I'm able to forgive the wonky science and all of that.
Mm-hmm. I actually have to concede. You made me reflect on a couple things that did make the first one good. I think what's happened is that the second movie has so poorly affected me that I let it taint my memory of the first one a little bit, because there are a few things. I remember the opening sequence, the whole opening of like the death of Kirk and the birth of Kirk and the death of his father, was probably one of the best 10 minutes of cinema I've seen. I mean, it's right up there with the first 10 minutes of Up.
So good.
Where they somehow managed to paint a picture that no matter how much of a Star Trek fan you were, a sci-fi fan you were, you watch this intro and you can't help but feel very powerful emotions with it. The concept of an overwhelming force and a self-sacrifice to save the few, and it was brilliantly done with it was one of those things that transcends the genre. I think you could show that to anybody and they'd be brought to near tears, if not tears themselves.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is just kind of a fun trivia. So at the end, when they're having their final confrontation with the Romulans, they get stuck in the black hole, and the Enterprise is mercilessly firing on them.
Yeah.
A bit vicious too. He didn't need to do that. That was his insult to injury.
Yeah.
But during that scene, the music swells, dies down, and you hear the chorus kind of be brought up in that part, and it's my favorite part musically of the movie. I was looking at some of the commentaries around that time, and one of the things they said was funny was that the music. Who was the one who composed everything?
Michael Giacchino.
Okay, so Giacchino. One of the things he does apparently is when because he loves voice, he loves implementing voice in a lot of his scripts, and doing kind of Gregorian chants or kind of a choir ensemble type feel, which was very prominent in that particular piece. However, normally when they write it, they just kind of write random noises oh, ah, like that. But he doesn't do that. He actually uses words, but he draws them out so long that you really can't understand them. But he makes little Easter egg sentences inside of his music. And I think on that score in particular, they said that the choir is singing something about I love my cats, they are amazing. But it's so drawn out. It's just oh, I love my cat. They emphasize the wrong pitches too. So I don't know if I've listened for it. I don't think I could ever really pick out the words, but I think if you actually took it and compressed it and made it faster, I bet you could actually pick up on the words that they're singing. But
I've never heard that before. I'll have to look into that.
I hope I'm not pulling that out of thin air, because I promise I remember hearing that on the director's commentary, but I've never confirmed it, so.
Okay. Well, let's get into your complaints about Into Darkness.
Okay, Into Darkness. That's where that plot went. It was Into Darkness. Okay, character-wise, I really felt like there was a lot of inconsistency. Scotty electing to resign his post, I felt was very out of character. I know he was trying to make a stance, but I mean, the Scotty of the original series and who I have despite you saying it's just a different thing, they're allowed to do different stuff. It's true, But like when something's so fundamentally against the character who he's like based on, it bothers me because that was the thing. Like Scotty was notorious for never being allowed. Like he would never let himself be taken away from the Enterprise. Like it was his baby. And even if something horrible were happening, like that would make him more determined to be on the ship to make sure that like when the crap hit the fan, he could fix it. So right off the get-go, it was rubbing me the wrong way. Oh, and then okay, once again, so technology stuff. This is, this is gonna be something that I think people can explain away, but it's my biggest pet peeves of all of them. It all has to do with the Federation and Kronos, which is the capital of the Klingon homeworld. The Klingon homeworld.
Mm-hmm.
Khan in the movie makes his attack on Starfleet headquarters when he's caused the crisis and gets all the heads together. And then he proceeds to attack them. First off, I'm pretty sure that they did a worse job of air security in a place where people could have hover ships and spacecraft than we currently do of our own skies. Granted, people still make terrorist attacks, so not perfect, but the real concern I had is the fact that when he was finally being beat and he had to leave, he did a teleport, right? So you think, he teleported to a ship in orbit. No, he teleported to Kronos. I don't know if you've ever paid attention, but Kronos is literally light years away from Earth. Like, very, very far. And they just say it's because they used Scotty's special formula. Scotty's formula that is described very much in depth in the first movie is simply a formula that allows you to teleport from non-warp to warp or warp to not warp.
Yeah.
And that was a big problem with the first one too, is as the Enterprise had been traveling away from the ice planet for as long as it took Kirk to find Spock and then to find Scotty to get to a teleporter to teleport, they should have been out of range. But I can almost forgive that, claiming like an idea saying that the Enterprise probably need to do some repairs or something. Like you can explain that one away with force. But Earth to Kronos, why would you need spaceships if you can transport like that? It was obviously more cost effective. You could easily transport hundreds of thousands of people. You would never need to do anything in a spaceship except maybe locate somewhere to transport. So what? Do you need probes? You'd send a probe out. It finds a hospitable planet. Oh, cool. Let's warp there and find out what it's like. It effectively made it so that if that technology existed, why does Starfleet need a fleet?
Yeah.
And then we're going to step into it a little further. Because then we have the Enterprise. Pissed off Kirk gets into a ship, takes on these torpedoes. Scotty gets off the Enterprise. Just malarkey right there. Then he flies to Klingon space within 24 hours. Once again, traveling at faster than light, yes, can get pretty far. But it's well established. Fastest warp travel they should have had at that point should be warp 3. Warp 5 shouldn't be until they build the Enterprise A, which is the one that's probably going to make an appearance at the end of Star Trek Beyond, because they made it pretty clear in Star Trek Beyond trailers that the Enterprise is going to be destroyed. Again. Well, it happens, and in the original timeline, then they get the Enterprise A, which looked very similar, but was a very advanced ship for its time, and Warp 5 was its highest capacity. If I'm wrong about that, superfans, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I'm right, though. But the spirit of what I'm saying is definitely true. I know for a fact that the warp capabilities, and we know what warp means. It's a very basic, fundamental concept. And so for them to say, all of a sudden, when in Star Trek, even the original series, they made it pretty obvious that it would take weeks of space travel at warp to reach Klingon space, let alone Kronos. Probably months, honestly. To then suddenly say that the galaxy is so small that it takes a day to get to Klingon space from Earth, the heart of the Federation. It pisses me off because they've taken this vast universe that part of the reason why it was so amazing was how big it was and how incalculable the adventures that one could have in it are. If they've condensed it to that small of a space, I don't see where they can take it in the future, except for taking it to places that are just ridiculous and inconsistent with the series as a whole. I mean, they are treating a warp drive like a hyperdrive from Star Wars. And that was one of the things I treasured the most, was the fact that a warp drive is actually a real thing. Like, we conceivably could make a warp drive and use it the way they use it in Star Trek. Hyperdrive is just magic, effectively. And so it makes me mad.
Yeah.
That was a long rant. I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay.
Told you, there's a lot of pent-up anger over this.
Yeah. It seems to me that most of your complaints about the Star Trek reboot movies are from a world-building perspective.
Well, I am a writer, so I guess that's part of it, but I don't know. I think good writers keep consistency. I mean, when...
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than any show. I don't care if it's a movie, if it's an anime, if it's a video game. There's nothing worse than heroes who just manage to magically or miraculously have the solution to their problems, no matter what. I mean, it's the reason why Indiana Jones, why the first Indiana Jones is a crap movie. If you really examine it, like, I love that movie, but when you really look at it, the plot, the entire movie, Indy is a pointless character.
Yeah.
Literally, he has no
Everything
impact.
would have played out exactly the same, whether he was there or not.
Yeah, maybe it would have had a slight change in the order of some things, but literally, he could have never found out anything about the whole looking for the staff to find the Ark, and the entire sequence of events would have ended the same. Yeah. That's what they're doing with the Star Trek series. That's what's pissing me off about it, is that they're effectively making it so it doesn't matter how things happen, they just happen.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I'm not here saying that the Star Trek reboot movies are great Star Trek movies. Like I said, I tolerate them because I separate them in my mind. Like, to me, they don't exist in the same universe. It's like I said, there's Star Trek and then there's Star Trek. But the thing I really like about the reboot movies is I feel like they do a really good job of capturing the characters and giving them personalities and making me as the viewer care about their journey. When I would have expected watching the whole, like, reverse Wrath of Khan thing, you know, which, spoiler alert, I guess we've kind of spoiled a lot of things about these movies, but
I mean, I don't know, I can't remember what the fundamental rule about spoiler is, but I think it's like after like 2 years it's all up for game. Like, I think it's even shorter than that technically, but like 2 years is the point where, like, you can't complain about it anymore.
Yeah, and you really can't talk about things from an analytical perspective like we are without spoiling things. Mm-hmm. But when it's reversed and Kirk dies instead of Spock,
I liked that scene. That scene was awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I would expect to hate that, because, I mean, obviously it's just, you know, playing off of the Wrath of Khan, but
actually
they did it so well, and I actually felt that moment.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the Star Trek Reboot series, because when I watch Star Trek the original series, I don't have that emotional connection with the characters.
Yeah. Okay.
At that point, it's all about the exploration and the physics and the science and all of that, and less about the characters. And I guess that's what brings me back to the Reboot series to watch it multiple times, is it's actually a character study of those characters.
I guess so, but, like, once again, I mean, diving into Next Generation, but, like, from Next Generation on, like, somehow they actually found, like, a marriage of the two. Like, my favorite one, Voyager, is, like, it's about the characters and the science. Like, they have a wonderful balance between the two, and that's what makes it great. But regardless, anyway, here's an interesting opinion, honestly. I actually think that we've touched on something that, despite all the flaws of Into Darkness, something that they could have done, I think would have made it not only a more successful film, but it also would have made it far more memorable. Like, I think people would still be talking about it today, like, a lot. And that's if they had actually just killed Kirk.
Yeah.
Like, bringing him back with the blood, I can see why, but it's a very cheap blow. By the way, it's another problem, too, because technically that means if you have Khan and, like, you kept him in stasis but continually took some blood from him, you've effectively cured all death. But regardless of that oversight of plot, no one wants to say they want to just kill Kirk, but, I mean... Okay, well, here's a real spoiler alert if you haven't watched the new Star Wars Episode 7, which, if you haven't, who are you and why are you listening to a sci-fi podcast? But if you haven't, skip for a little bit. But when we have at the end of Episode 7, when Han dies, if they'd suddenly brought him back at the end of the movie, wouldn't that have completely, like, kind of ruined the movie?
Yeah, for sure.
And, like, the cheap way of bringing Kirk back, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a character, but, like, his death it meant something. It was powerful,
yeah.
And that scene was very, very strong, and it was ruined because death really had no meaning in the end of the movie, and that's one of the biggest flaws of any, it's actually a major flaw that I see a lot in any type of fan fiction, is where these people are so enraptured by the characters that they don't see them or perceive them as having flaws or being mortal anymore. Yeah. And so they have plot armor that makes it so that they can go through the most ridiculous things, and it seems like nothing could ever actually happen to them.
Can we just agree that fan fiction is the worst?
Yeah, I'd say 90% of it easily is. There are some stars in it. Heck, my favorite author, Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, I love Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah. Do you ever hear him talk about, like, how he got brought in to help finish The Wheel of Time when Robert Jordan passed away?
I've heard a little bit about that story.
Like, boiling it down to its basics, effectively Brandon was brought in because he was a fan fiction writer who did a really fantastic job about it.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he wasn't actually writing fan fiction. He had just written some really in-depth... Like, when Robert Jordan passed away, he wrote a blog for, like, weeks where he just talked about, like, what made these stories great and about the characters. And Robert Jordan's wife... Is it Robert Jordan?
Yeah, Robert Jordan.
Okay. For some reason, I was like, wait a second, I messed it up. His wife actually was looking around trying to find somebody who could finish the series. Because she was really involved. It turned, like, I don't know if you knew this, but she was she was an editor, and she was very heavily involved in the making of these books. And so she was personally scouting for somebody who could do the books justice, and she happened upon his vlog, and she loved his writing style, and so she like he talked about how he got like a voicemail one day saying, "Hey, this is so and so representing this publisher, calling on behalf of Mrs. Jordan." She wants you to write a three chapters, picking up from the end of the last book of the Wheel of Time series. Just write the chapters as best you can and try and see I want to see how you make them sound. And he's just like, yeah. You really should look it up. Audience, if you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson, which you should be, if you're not, look him up. He's really good.
Yeah.
And ironically, he does fantasy at the moment, but he's actually going to be doing arcs where they start off in fantasy, advance through time and technology, and eventually will become a sci-fi spacefaring nations, but operating on the same systems and cultures that you see the foundation of in the fantasy. It's really cool.
Well, and he does have a series that qualifies as science fiction, I feel.
The Reckoners?
Yeah, The Reckoners.
Yeah, that's a great series.
Yeah.
Have you finished it yet?
I have read the first book, and that's it.
Oh, what's wrong with you? Okay, we need you to finish it, because I was just about to say we need to do a podcast about it.
Yeah, let me explain. I read only the first book, and I just finished it like a week and a half ago. So, yeah.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you finish it, Calamity, we will have to do a podcast about it.
That sounds good.
It really it takes leaps into sci-fi by the end. Like, it really becomes sci-fi.
All right. Well, I'm excited about it. We have the other 2 books, so I just need to get to reading them.
I'm excited. We are really off topic though.
Yeah. Well, it's time to wrap up now. So
okay.
if you would like to suggest a topic for us to talk about, our email address is thescifizone@gmail.com. Feel free to write in, give us any suggestions for topics, any criticisms or concerns you may have. We'd love to hear from you. And Jordan, why don't you tell them about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so I love podcasts, and I've really been wanting to do one for a long time. But primarily, I do run a YouTube channel called The Blue Shifting. So just the Blue Shifting on YouTube. I focus primarily on anything that has concrete storyline. So I do a lot of visual novel work. I also do a lot of anime review and theory speculation, and I also have a special Brandon Sanderson type of, I guess it's a type of exploration of his books, but it's actually a project I worked on with him, and I take a very creative spin on it with a character that I actually came up with him. We were able to talk about it and kind of compile this idea of how people who are new to the series or interested in certain topics of the series could look them up and learn something about them while also enjoying a fun story. So check that out if you're interested at all. But more or less, I just do what I feel passionate about on there, and I'd love to have you join me on there. Once again, it's The Blue Shifting, all one word, and hopefully it's something you like. I also want to point out that, this is something that we are really passionate about, and so if you have anything you want to share, or even something you'd like that you really want us to talk about, please let us know, and please share this with your friends, anybody who you think might be interested in it. If you're not a nerd yourself, find your local nerd and share it. It really would mean a lot to us, because we want to make sure that we can find and share stuff with people who are interested in this.
Yeah, for sure. We love talking about science fiction, and we would love to have people to listen to us talk about it.
Yeah, and mostly, I think we mostly just like the sound of our own voice, and we're pretty much convinced that we got something fun to share. But
no,
whatever.
I just like the sound of your voice.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and if you want to see the other stuff that I do, I am the station manager for a company called Geek Factor Radio. Their website is geekfactor-radio.com, and you can check me out there. I'm part of the internal development team. I edit all of their podcasts, and I appear on several of them, so you can check me out there. And with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to our self-promotion, and we'll see you next time.